Picture this. You're facing 20,000 heavily armed enemy soldiers with just 100 men. No backup coming, no air support, no heavy weapons, just you and certain death. What do? Most people would pray, some would run, but Colonel Orde Wingate, he walked straight into the enemy camp and convinced all 20,000 soldiers to surrender. This man didn't just win a battle, he broke the laws of warfare itself. By the end of this video, you'll discover how one person's mind became the most devastating weapon in World War II history. It's 1941, East Africa. The British Empire is fighting for survival on multiple fronts. Hitler is crushing Europe, and his ally, Mussolini, controls a massive chunk of Africa with his Italian East African Empire. We're talking about territories spanning modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. Millions of square miles defended by over 20,000 battle-hardened Italian troops positioned in mountain fortresses that would make medieval castles look like sandcastles. The British High Command faces a nightmare scenario. They need to capture this territory to secure the Red Sea route, but they can only spare 1,700 soldiers. That's not a military operation, that's a suicide mission. The math is simple and terrifying. 12 Italian soldiers for every 1 British soldier. In conventional warfare, this would be a massacre. But then enters the most unconventional soldier in British military history, Colonel Orde Wingate. This man was so bizarre that his own commanders thought he'd lost his mind. He would conduct strategy meetings, completely naked, eat raw onions like they were candy, and once tried to kill himself because he thought he was going insane. But here's the terrifying truth. Beneath this madness was a military genius who understood something that would change warfare forever. Wingate realized something that no other commander had figured out. Those Italian garrisons scattered across hundreds of miles of African wilderness, they were operating blind. No reliable communication, no accurate intelligence, no idea what they were really facing. They were tough soldiers, but they were fighting ghosts in their own minds. So Wingate made a decision that would either make him a legend or get him court-martialed. Instead of attacking with conventional tactics, he would wage war on the human psyche itself. He would make 1,700 men appear to be 20,000. He would turn fear into his greatest weapon. He would convince the entire Italian army that resistance wasn't just futile, it was insane. The plan was absolutely suicidal. If even one Italian commander called his bluff, if even one garrison decided to fight instead of surrender, Wingate's tiny force would be annihilated. But Wingate had spent months studying Italian military culture, their command structure, their fears, their pride. He was about to hack their psychology like a master manipulator. Wingate's first target was a strategic mountain pass defended by 800 Italian soldiers in a fortress that seemed impregnable. He approached with just 50 men, but he made sure the Italians could never see his full force at once. Some men would appear on the eastern ridge, disappear, then reappear on the western slope. Radio operators sent coded messages across multiple frequencies, creating the impression of massive coordination. At night, the psychological warfare intensified. Wingate's men lit dozens of campfires across the mountainside, each one representing a different unit. They played recorded sounds of tank engines and marching soldiers from hidden speakers. Italian sentries reported seeing British patrols from multiple directions simultaneously. The fortress commander was receiving reports of a massive army surrounding his position. Then came Wingate's masterstroke, the ultimatum. But this wasn't just a surrender demand. This was psychological manipulation at its finest. The message read, "To the brave commander of the Italian garrison, you and your men have fought with honor, but you are now completely surrounded by overwhelming British forces. I offer you the dignity of honorable surrender. Your men will be treated as prisoners of war with full military respect. You have 30 minutes to decide between honor and annihilation." The Italian commander faced an impossible choice. All evidence pointed to a massive British force. The confident tone of the message suggested overwhelming superiority. His own scouts confirmed enemy positions on all sides. After 25 minutes of agonizing deliberation, he made his decision. 800 men laid down their arms without firing a single shot. But this victory created something far more valuable than captured territory. It created a legend. Word of Wingate's victory spread through Italian communication networks like wildfire. But here's where Wingate's genius truly showed. He understood that in warfare, reputation is everything. He made sure that every Italian garrison heard about the massive British force that had captured the mountain fortress. Radio operators intercepted Italian transmission. The British have broken through with overwhelming numbers. They appeared from nowhere with tanks and artillery. Resistance is impossible. Each retelling made Wingate's force sound larger, more powerful, more unstoppable. Wingate fed this machine deliberately. He would attack multiple positions simultaneously with tiny forces, creating the impression of a coordinated assault by a massive army. Italian commanders would receive reports of British forces attacking from the north, south, east, and west at the same time. How could they know it was the same 30 soldiers moving between positions? The psychological effect was devastating. Italian morale began collapsing, not because of military defeats, but because of the belief that defeat was inevitable. Soldiers would see British scouts and immediately assume they were facing overwhelming odds. Commanders would order retreat before any fighting began. Wingate had weaponized fear itself. By March 1941, something unprecedented was happening. Entire Italian garrisons were surrendering based on rumors alone. A single British soldier would approach an Italian outpost with a surrender demand, and 200 Italian soldiers would lay down their weapons without questioning why he came alone. The psychology was perfect and terrifying. Each surrender validated the next one. Italian commanders would think, if Captain Rossi's fortress fell to the British, and he had 300 men and better weapons than us, how can we possibly resist? Didn't know that Captain Rossi had surrendered to 20 British soldiers who convinced him he was facing 2,000. Wingate had created a psychological avalanche. Each victory, no matter how small, proved to the next garrison that the British were unstoppable. Each Italian defeat became evidence of British superiority. Fear was spreading faster than any army could march, and surrender was becoming more logical than resistance. But the ultimate test was still coming. In April 1941, Wingate faced his greatest challenge, Debre Marcos, the heart of Italian resistance in East Africa. This wasn't just another outpost. This was a massive fortress complex defended by 5,000 elite Italian soldiers under commanders who still believed in Mussolini's empire. These men had heard the rumors, but they were professional soldiers who trusted their weapons more than ghost stories. Wingate arrived with fewer than 100 men. The odds were 50 to 1 against him. He had no artillery, no air support, no reinforcements coming. His reputation was his only weapon, and reputations don't stop bullets. This would be the ultimate test of psychological warfare versus military reality. The Italian commanders knew they were facing Wingate, the phantom general who had captured so many garrisons. But they also knew they had him outnumbered 50 to 1 in a fortress designed to withstand massive assaults. They were confident, well supplied, and ready for a fight. Wingate studied the fortress for 3 days. He watched patrol patterns, identified key commanders, analyzed defensive positions. Then he prepared his most audacious bluff yet. On April 6, 1941, Wingate sent his final ultimatum to Debre Marcos. But this message was different. It was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. To the commanders of Debre Marcos garrison, you have fought bravely, but the situation has changed. British forces, numbering over 15,000 soldiers, with full artillery and air support, are now converging on your position. You are completely surrounded, with no possibility of escape or reinforcement. I offer you 60 minutes to surrender, with full military honors. Your alternative is total annihilation. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. My artillery commanders are eager to demonstrate their capabilities. The message was brilliant because it addressed every psychological pressure point. It acknowledged Italian bravery, claimed overwhelming force, set a time limit to prevent careful analysis, and threatened devastating consequences. But most importantly, it was delivered with absolute confidence. For 45 minutes, the fortress was silent. Italian commanders held emergency meetings. Radio operators tried desperately to contact other garrisons for confirmation. Scouts reported British positions on multiple ridges. Everything seemed to confirm Wingate's claims. Then something extraordinary happened. At exactly 59 minutes after the ultimatum, a white flag appeared on the fortress walls. Then another, then dozens. 5,000 Italian soldiers began emerging from their positions with their hands raised. The Italian commander, Colonel Giuseppe Manfredi, approached under a flag of truce, expecting to formally surrender to a British general backed by thousands of troops and heavy weapons. Instead, he found Wingate standing calmly with a handful of soldiers. No massive army, no artillery, no air support, just a small group of men who had somehow convinced an entire fortress to surrender. Colonel Manfredi stared in complete disbelief and asked the question that would echo through military history. Where is the rest of your army? Wingate's response became legendary. Colonel, you're looking at it. The silence that followed was deafening. 5,000 Italian soldiers realized they had just surrendered to fewer than 100 British troops. They had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior psychology. The greatest bluff in military history was complete. When the final numbers were calculated, they seemed impossible. Wingate's 1,700-man force had accepted the surrender of over 20,000 Italian soldiers across East Africa. The Italian East African Empire had collapsed, not because of overwhelming military force, but because of overwhelming psychological pressure. Think about this for a moment. One man's understanding of human psychology had achieved what would have required massive armies, months of fighting, and thousands of casualties. Wingate had proven that, in warfare, the mind is the ultimate battlefield. But the implications went far beyond military strategy. Wingate had demonstrated something profound about human nature, that confidence, properly applied and strategically presented, can literally move mountains. He didn't win because he had better weapons or more soldiers. He won because he understood that perception shapes reality and reality shapes behavior. This story teaches us something revolutionary about the power of psychology and confidence. In a world where everyone focuses on resources, weapons, and numbers, Wingate focused on the one thing that determines how all those resources get used: the human mind. The next time someone tells you that one person can't make a difference, remember Colonel Orde Wingate. Remember that he didn't just defeat an army, he defeated the idea that his army could be defeated. He turned his greatest weakness into his greatest strength by making his enemies believe that weakness was actually overwhelming power. In your own life, when you face impossible odds, remember that battles are won first in the mind. Whether you're fighting for a promotion, starting a business, or facing any seemingly insurmountable challenge, the principles are the same. Confidence backed by strategic thinking can achieve what brute force never could. Wingate proved that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with bullets, but with brain, and that understanding people's psychology is more powerful than understanding their weapons. If this incredible story of mental warfare and impossible victory blew your mind like it blew mine, smash that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable military history that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, strategy, and human nature. What other impossible military victories do you want me to uncover? Drop your suggestions in the comments below, and I'll find the most mind-bending stories in military history.